Wilcox Wells there. Um, uh, very good producers. Cage Ranch was a Vicksburg, very good. Chapman Ranch was a Vicksburg, very good. And then Exxon and I did a deal together at Southwest Kingsville that was very good. But anyway, as the gas price kind of got negative, we started focusing a little bit more in the Permian Basin, uh, playing more of the oil economics. And as that has gone forward, it's really become a big boys game. Almost more of a manufacturing game than exploration, which is fine, but
Good afternoon.
it's a whole different set of economics. So anyway, what we've been looking at is about 2 years ago, I wanted to refocus back on South Texas, Upper Gulf Coast. And I really felt like nat gas would be the play. And even today, I mean, if you look at it today, uh, energy equivalent, the old 6-to-1 ratio, that 6 MCF is same energy equivalent as 1 barrel of oil. Well, if oil's $72 or whatever it is today, that would mean nat gas has the chance to be energy equivalent of what, $11, $12. I'm not saying that's fixing to happen. I'd love it, but I don't see that. But what I do see is that nat gas has a chance to have a big product price explosion. Whereas I think with oil, I think very happy about the new administration, but they're going to temper down on oil because the political game is how cheap will your gallon of gasoline be. And I don't see that getting much over. I think that's going to be bound in the $60 to $75 range. Whether I'm right or wrong, who knows, but I've obviously bet on the nat gas game. So we've been looking for the next big project there, and Tony Maharick had worked this prospect, at least a couple of decades. And on this prospect, it's not developmental, it is exploratory. But with the science that we've put into it, we believe we've de-risked it significantly. And Tony has, we bought the 3D, bought all the acreage, spent a few $1 million on all of that. And now are looking for the partners to finish filling out who's going to participate on this. And we also went and retained Deborah Sockery, who is she's actually president of the AAPG right now. That's American Association of Petroleum Geologists. And she works with this AI program called Paradise, and she's done extremely well. I'll let Tony get into more success rate, but very, very good. So she's also studied and analyzed this. And then we brought in one partner that took a big piece, and they're out of Guadalajara, Mexico, Akron. In fact, they're the second largest midstream company in Mexico. And they wanted to get into E&P, so they went and hired a very good geologist, Tim Strutt. And so they took a third of this and are very excited about it. So we have science, this project to death. Because there's been at least 3 or 4, as a matter of fact, Akron even had a couple of more geophysicists study it and look at it. And we've had a lot of eyes on the science of this. So what we're looking for now is to fill out the rest of the interest and go forward and drill. There's not very many prospects that you can get your hands on that have 300 BCF potential. This is definitely one of them. This reminds me a lot of Southwest Speaks and some of those other plays that we've done in the past. So we're quite excited. Jim wanted to get his clients in for a certain percentage of the deal. That's what he's doing. And that's why I'm on the Zoom, to give my endorsement of Jim to bring in some clients on it. And then, of course, Tony, this is his 20-year-old baby, the Geronimo. And with that, I'll leave it be and let Tony and Jim take the rest of the call, unless anybody has any questions for me. All right, y'all go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks again, y'all, for joining in. Yeah, Bill mentioned I've been associated with this prospect for more than 25 years, actually. I generated it. It's a large gas condensate play in the geopressured section in South Texas. We'll go into it in much more detail on maps, geologic columns, and the seismic. But basically what happened was I had my own firm in Houston. I was generating prospects. We back in mid 1990s, around 1995, off some 2D seismic. That's what was around back then. Some 2D, well, that's what I had access to. I saw this large untested structure in central Duval County in South Texas. Actually optioned the acreage with some investors, and we flipped it or sold it to UPR, Union Pacific Resources, to drill. They shot a 3D. That was some of the early 3Ds, but we shot a 3D with Western Geophysical, 1998, and it confirmed the structure and the play, which was large. And UPR was giving its, possibly as even 300 to 500 BCF of gas reserves. Well, 1 month before we were due to spud, or UPR was due to spud, they got purchased by Anadarko Petroleum. And Anadarko was no longer working to Wilcox Gulf Coast. They were offshore in other plays. So the acreage just basically fell apart. And after working with Bill for the last 5 years now, pushing 5 years, and his request to come back in the Gulf Coast, I researched and saw if anyone had drilled in the last 20 years this Geronimo prospect, and they did not. And it was sort of a blessing, because we licensed the 3D again from Western, and we reprocessed it with the latest hydrocarbon indicator software on the market. I used a company called Tricon Geophysical, which does a lot of Exxon's work, to do refine the seismic, look at hydrocarbon indicators. And then, as Bill had just mentioned, Deborah Secre, she used her Paradise AI software, which has been highly successful in delineating not only whether or not you have sands, but you have pays, and also their subaerial extent. So we've done a lot of work with the latest software that actually indicated that the southwest side of this structure is the one that has the best chance of producing. and there's two large fault blocks in play. But basically, our target sands, the main target sands, are the Upper Wilcox at depths ranging from 10,000 actually to 14,300 feet. We're going to take this first vertical test down deeper on the west flank. And also the work Deborah did turned up a really nice size, a large too, a 50 BCF shallow gas condensate prospect in the overlying Queen City Formation at 9,000 feet. So without further ado, let me go into this a little bit more details. Of course, every geologist has to have a geologic column. And point being here is what we're targeting are typically called the Hennett sands in Duval and Webb County, Zapata County, and it's the first through the seventh Hennett sands. Other operators, might call them the Slick and Luling or the Hofstetter sands, but they're all the Upper Wilcox section. And from the nomenclature that I used with UPR, we just did, numbered all the various levels to map seismically: UW1, UW5, UW17. There's actually a UW19, but these are the targets, and they're Eocene age Upper Wilcox. And where are we? Here's blow it up a little bit here. You can see the Geronimo prospect. If you were to throw a dart and hit almost the center of Duval County, that's where it is. And the major fields that have been historically hit over the last 30, 40 years are shown in blue, and they are the same age, Upper Wilcox sands, that have produced just very prolifically. Rosita Field, just 5 miles north of us, that actually Bill Orr participated in a number of wells during that active development period in the early 1990s. It's already produced 395 billion cubic feet of gas. Destino Field, Muy Grande Field, and Guerra Field, those are just another 3 sets of fields productive from the Upper Wilcox. Hennett sands, and even deeper, they call the House sands. And the next closest one regionally along strike is actually almost exactly the same size as our structure. And that's called Northeast Thompsonville Field, 30 miles southwest of Geronimo. And that field has already made 710 BCF. So we're in a really prolific fairway, and I'm glad that we've got the play. I had the chance to put this prospect together with Bill and allowed us to use the very latest software to attack, on this exploration play, what we're going for. Here's just an outline of the Western GECO 3D. This was shot in 1998, 600 square miles, and this is showing again the position of the Geronimo prospect in the analog fields. Don't hesitate to interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. I'll try to answer as best I can. But I'm a geologist, geophysicist type. I've been working my seismic ever since day one at Tenneco, and I trained in 1975, actually. But here's a 2D line what I worked back in 1990s. And on the west side, this is up towards some of that production. And as you go down, you go down toward the middle of the seismic section, you see this huge feature. And this feature is showing 1,000 to 2,000 feet of vertical relief. This was my first clue that there's a big feature out here that's never been tested. This is an outline of the 30 square.
Just to point out, 2,000 feet of vertical relief is enormous. I'll show you a cross section here in a little bit, but that's massive. And as far as the amount that closure can capture. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
Yes. Again, here's a regional map showing position of Geronimo and some of the analog fields immediately north and northwest. with Rosita, Destino, and Muy Grande. We'll go into more details on that, but it's just showing that the position regionally that contains the same sand section that we're hunting at Geronimo on our play. Great production in some of these wells, not all, but you could get several wells out of each field that made 30, 40 BCF. One well made 60 BCF from Rosita. But yeah, terrific production in the Upper Wilcox. What we're seeing most prospective are the R and the S, and actually the Hennet sands above where this particular well made 42 BCF of gas. But if you go look at the other analogs along strike, you have even greater production from the same sand. So,
Okay, so point out what 42 BCF is 42 million thousands. So if gas was at $3, that's over $120 million gross. Now on a well that your well cost here is at probably what an average of about $10 million a well, not including acreage. So just to point that out. Go ahead, Tommy.
yeah. Of course, back when these wells were drilled in the 60s or whatever, gas was probably $2 or less, and the dry hull cost was about 5-6 million. But still, definitely monster wells make monster amount of money. All right, one of the best analogs for this structure is Thompsonville Field, Thompsonville Northeast, located to the southwest of us. In that field, we'll go into that here in a little bit, but these are just regional net sand isopachs, actually out of the literature, the geologic literature, showing that where our dot is, it's in a fairway of very, very thick deltaic, and even there's some deep water sands composed in this. If you include the basal Wilcox with the upper Wilcox, you've got over 1,000 feet of net sand just immediately up dip of us, proven in those old wells, the old field wells. Again, here's Northeast Thompsonville. This is a structure map on top of the first Hennet sand. It's really very close to the top of Wilcox. This feature is about 5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. It's already it's produced 700 billion cubic feet of gas. In fact, the whole bean number 1 has already produced 44 BCF of gas since 1960. Still active. Great field, great production.
A structure map is basically like a topographic map under the ground of the hill under the ground that contains the hydrocarbons. So it's like you're looking at a topographic map if you were to hike across the mountains, but this is under the ground. So
right.
Okay.
And yeah, another point here, our structure is very similar in size, but we actually have more relief, Jim. There's about 600 feet of relief at the top of the Wilcox here. We're seeing over 1,000 feet on our feature.
Correct, yes.
And again, you correlate, you want to make sure you got sands crossing this block, and you correlate the wells that are in those up-dip fields, and you could carry these sands regionally for miles and miles, from all the way down from Mexico all the way up here. And I call them the UW1, the UW2, UW3, and 4 are the first 4 major ones on the up dip. And a great analog too for these Hennet sands is Muy Grande Field, 10 miles due west. And here's what the sands look like on electric logs. You've got about 260 feet of sands total, broken up into 4 or 5 members here, with excellent rock qualities, 22 to 28%. This is the type of reservoir rock you want to hit, gas and condensate in and get these high flow rate wells that can flow up to 30, 40 million a day. Here's an analog, the UW17 Pay and Muy Grande, which is one of our main targets on our first well. This is the Gruy sand. It had 80 feet of net pay. Now they did commingle it with a deeper sand below, but to date the well's made almost 35 billion cubic feet of gas. And we can tie this well right into our play, our first test fault block. Here's just a decline curve on the Gruy sand, UW17, showing its tremendous flow rates, 30, 40 million a day over the life of this well with some condensate. Destino Field, next field just north of that. Here we go again. We've got the Hennet Sands, good porosity and perm. There's some wells here that they're still producing from down at sands at 15,000 feet in this field. But here's a well with 42 feet of net pay behind pipe. They've never come up yet. It had good gas show, drilled it with 15-pound mud. Sand like this will easily flow 3 to 5 million a day. So that's behind pipe. And a lot of these wells over here at Destino are in the Hennet are still behind pipe, awaiting future completion. Here's a regional seismic line, which goes from our Geronimo block. This is off of 3D, and it's showing our huge structure with the tremendous relief on this bump. It may be a deep-seated shale diapiric feature, but if you go back to the left or west, northwest, there's Destino Field. And the first star above are those sands I just showed you, the Hennet Sands in this green interval. And then deeper down in what they call the house sands, and actually the UW17 at the top of the house is down below. And you can track these by seismic. You go down into a regional low synclinal area, and you could just see both sections coming up very high structurally on the Geronimo structure, faulted anticlinal structure.
This slide right here is perhaps one of the most impressive ones that we have for everyone that's looking at this. That box that says T/WX, that means top of the Wilcox.
Right.
The Hennet Sands, that's a green arrow pointing to that. That's the same thing. As you follow that purple line from left to right, you notice that the fault lines there creating that displacement. I believe that displacement is as much as 2,000 feet. Is that right?
Vertically from the synclinal low to the highs, 2,000 feet, Jim.
Okay.
Each fault is showing somewhere between 2 to 300 or 400 feet of throw,
Okay.
which is based on all the larger fields. Your larger accumulations occur on faults that are at least 150 feet or more in throw. So we're seeing that.
What you're looking at here is a slice of the earth laid on its side. Imagine on the right-hand side where the Geronimo is, that continuing for 6 miles long and 2 miles wide. That's what we're looking at.
Correct. Again, a couple more seismic images through analog fields. Muy Grande, just a blow up of where the pays are here at that field, and also all the pays in Rosita Field made 400 BCF, where Bill has participated in the past. Okay, let's go a little more into the seismic. Deborah Sacre, president of APG, she'd be here, but she's actually in Europe for the next couple of weeks, heading up a bunch of regional meetings with APG. She's got head of 17,000 members worldwide. Pretty busy lady. But anyway, here's a map on top of the Wilcox. And this is a time structure map. And we got them divided into 20 millisecond contours, which is roughly 100 feet each. So you have this big east closure and you have this large west closure. The east closure is the one that's showing easily 1,000 feet of relief here. And there's a similar but lesser amount on the downthrown closures. But that's the supporting seismic showing that this overall feature, 6 miles long and 2 miles wide, the nearest field size that competes with this is Fandango. productive from the same sands we're hunting here, and that's 700 BCF. I don't know if we're going to get 700 BCF. Can our structure hold it? Yes. It'll require, some very thick sands. We do think it has a very good, reasonable shot, though, at 300 BCF. Here's just another map where we outlined Deborah here off of some of her work combined with mine, showing these two first big closures we want to drill. There's one on the east side, one on the west. We're talking 30, 40 BCF potential here on each of these locations.
So 300 BCF is $1 billion thereabouts gross at $3 gas.
Correct.
Yeah.
Here's a map, again, time structure map on top of the UW3. This is that one of the upper Hinnett sands. That's also a big producer regionally. A map level shown green. And what you're showing here are the two big closures, one on the west and one on the east. On the east, we can drill down and maybe do a directional well and capture up to 6 or 8 sands. Or on the west, we can get probably at least 6. If we go deeper, we might get 7 or 8, but which is our current plans. But still, really, really large structures, large relief, and big reserves on both these closures that we're chasing. If you put, this is how you typically do a volumetric calculation. So at this UW3 level with 50 feet of net pay and a known recovery factor, and typical of the good wells in the offset fields, 2,000 MCF per acre foot, and usually get 5 to 10 barrels of condensate also. I didn't add that in there. But this would equate to 150 billion cubic feet of gas plus 1.5 million barrels of condensate. But 100, which would probably be 160 BCF equivalent. Anyway, huge structure, large, 1,500 net acres down to a possible gas water contact that we're seeing on our 3D. The image on the left is the reprocessed data with Tricon, and the one on the right is the Paradise software that Deborah ran, showing where she's where the horizon, anything that's colored yellow looks perspective to her with sand pays on hydrocarbon indicators that match what we see on the Tricon data. She's got a little, with her 3D geometry work, she can hone in on these individual little pay intervals. Like this is probably 60 feet of net pay. In a dip direction, but in a strike direction, she's able to map in 3D geobody, which would be this one single reservoir. In other words, if we tap this reservoir right here, we're going to have a closure. And then she went further on and calculated what's in it. Well, that particular one single geobody, using the parameters of her AI software. Let's talk about AI. It's actually machine learning software where she's able to train off the seismic data. Someone's phone's ringing, I'm not sure. But she's able to train the seismic data on 60 different variables. We're talking frequency, spectral analysis, things the human eye can't see. And she's been doing this for 10 years and been able to really rack up, like I think her success ratio now is 86%. But she calculates on this last geobody I just showed you, this interval, which is probably about 10,200 feet, a recoverable reserve estimate of 7.4 billion cubic feet of gas. Just this one zone. So you see when you start stacking 2 or 3 of these, you're getting up in that 30, you can easily get up in that 30, 40 BCF recovery range on individual wellbores. Now you got to get them all out once. You can probably dual 1 or 2 zones, and you might have to frack 1 or 2 zones depending on the reservoir rock quality. But in all these fields, there's always been banner reservoirs that did not require fracking, which is obviously what we'll go for first. get your highest flow rates. Here's some of the work that's showing the amplitudes in these blocks and how they're conforming up against. There's a down to the northwest fault here. With this amplitude that I see at this UW3 level that she mapped, I can volumetrically put in 8.4 BCF of gas with 30 feet of net pay. And she came up with 7.6. So it's a really good agreement between these two lines of software. Again, here's just a time structure map showing the adherence of the gas pay or pool, if you want to call it that, to the high side of that structure. UW4, the next level down. Again, we both see a north-south oriented geobody that would yield 7 BCF in the same wellbore that we just showed you before. So, I mean, just going down to 10,500 feet, you've exposed yourself to 14 billion cubic feet of gas. Again, more work done showing the beautiful alignment of the amplitudes to structure, which is what you want to see, indicating, gas, oil, float on water. So there's your water contact, or should be right about there. You're going to maximize your return by knowing where exactly in the geobodies to place these wells to get your most hydrocarbon recovery.
Okay, so what that means is the geometry of your faults align with your geophysical analysis. They match, which is what you want to see. Your amplitude matches your structure. That's very important. It doesn't. So they're consistent. That's what that means. Anyway,
Correct.
That's a very important point. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Again, I dropped down to UW5, 800 net acre closure at the UW5 on the east side. Just beautiful stuff. You could put 60 BCF just in the UW5 structure alone with 40 feet of net pay. And Deborah's seeing between 30 to 60 feet of average sand thickness so far in her work. Now, we need to drill a well. We have to calibrate the well and the logs back to both of our software and, fine tune the geobodies a little bit for our future development work. So, this hits 64 BCF at this one zone, and you have the next zone below 7 BCF, whatever. You could start to plan start drilling your immediate offset, so you could ramp this productivity of this structure up to 100 million or 150 million a day rapidly, because you'll have all the work done shortly. Anyway, UW5 again. This is just a regional strike line. It's oriented, it's BB prime, northeast, southwest. Again, I wanted to show the two key things geologists like to see is a lot of relief on a structure, one, but two, you want to see depositional thinning between off structure and on the crest of the structure. So, this area that we're going to be drilling is the isopac is thin, which what you want to see is that this structure formed early and the oil and gas got in place early to preserve the porosity and permeability of the rocks to give us the high flow rates. The west side closure, again, this short strike line, but showing these lit up intervals. The UW2 is here, UW3, UW17, and there's actually UW19 and down here that we want to drill. And we're seeing, it's typical in the offshore industry using AVO work, both offshore and onshore. Onshore in South Texas, Wilcox, you want to see typically what they call class 3 AVOs, and that's what we're seeing, an increase of amplitude between nears and fars, offsets. In other words, the geophones on the left over here were vertically below. You're recording vertically below the geophones here, whereas here on the right side, you're recording that sound information 3 miles away. When they shot this 3D, they had 30 square miles of cabling out. And what's going on here and why this is a gas indicator is when the sound energy is going down and it's going through a gas-filled rock and it's being bounced up to the upper geophones, gas will slow down the velocity. And as it slows down the velocity, it creates on our traces an increase in amplitude. So this is what a class 3 AVO is like. And at the levels of our target sands, we're seeing multiple AVO signatures stacked. And very encouraging that this large structure has stacked multiple pays. Again, here's down at the UW17, a 685 net acre closure that you can easily put 54 BCF on. This is where we're gonna, if we drill I believe we're gonna drill this west location first. It's really exciting. The amplitude on this actually is bigger than what I originally called the gas water contact. It's about 813 acres. So sometimes you get false amplitudes. I'm not going to say you can't get them from some of these rocks. You know, an oyster reef can have a lot of limestone in it and can create something like this, but it's conforming to structures. You know, not many oyster reefs conform to a fault closure like that. They're going to be elongated, depositional, and more extensive. Again, these are some of the AVO clouds, we call them, showing the distribution of the subaerial extent. This is a 385 acre down in the, I believe that is the UW17 interval. And again, at this interval, groovy sand, class 3 AVO, which is what works up dip. UW2 structure on the west closure shown here at red, this red interval. On our way down to go to the UW17 in purple, we're gonna hit all these potential pay zones. UW2 closure, 650 acres also. And then Deb's work confirms that this one zone, this UW2, should yield 8.7 BCF of gas plus liquids. And that's our west block location. We're going to take it deeper though. We want to see this this Wilcox wedge. Wilcox, when it wedges, sometimes also gives pays. It may not be lighting up as strong as the ones above, but to get a well through this interval will be very instructive for future development further further to the north on the development wells. And the east side could be the second well we drill. We'll jump over to the east fault block and drill this directional well and encounter all these potential multiple pays at depths less than 13,000 feet. Uh-huh.
So I have a question.
Sorry, no.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right.
Vertically above this at 9,000 feet, I mentioned a Queen City interval, and shown in I know it's a little busy map, but the work that Deborah did is showing that the sands in the Queen City, which also is a very high perv sand, has a potential to produce another 50 or 60 BCF of gas. And it looks like to me, it's a typical offshore bar oriented along depositional strike, northeast, southwest. You can see it better here. The yellow is the sand and also the hydrocarbon outline for this bar sand. Nobody's drilled it. There are a couple of other Queen City wells, but their type lock to the northeast, though, shows very well developed reservoir rock. And again, they're showing their software in her various variables that she was able to consolidate and compare to the work she's done in Queen City and other areas. She's showing a very prospective area on our lease block there in the center part of our play. Here's a seismic line through it, which is showing, this is called, her work is showing far angle stacks, where your far angle stacks, again, is where you stack your further traces, and when they light up like this, like a bright spot, you can anticipate that as being hydrocarbons. And then the type log, which is 2 miles to the northeast of us, you can see that it's this 60-foot net sand that's lighting up here. So we're very excited about future shallow development for gas condensate. You might get in the Queen City, you may get a higher condensate yield, 20-25 barrels per million. We won't know till we drill it. And another confirmation of this hydrocarbon zone is shown on this. Here it's a class what we call 2 or 2P, where you get a drop off of the amplitudes on far offsets. And it might be because this is close to geopressure, I'm not sure. But the funny thing is, this is exactly the signature you get in 3 other major Queen City fields in South Texas. So again, we're seeing the right things matching up on this mega structure, leading us to believe that we've got multiple stack pays from 9,000 down to 14,000 feet. This is when we get to drill that directional well on the east block, this is how it would be drilled, and these are the various horizons where they'd come in. This is just showing with Deborah's work, a single well bore, could intersect, pretty close to 40 BCF, divided into 3 or 4 zones. 4 zones, unless you want to, 5 zones actually. Here's 2 AFEs, one for the east location, one for the west. The west location, about $9.5 million completed. The east, 8.5. The difference is we're using larger casing size on the west side, where those deeper high pressure sands, the UW 17 and 19 are at, that have the capacity, we believe, to flow 10 or 20 plus million cubic feet a day. We want to be able to get it out of the ground. Another key thing we intend to employ is managed pressure drilling. It's something where you drill just over balanced, not too overbalanced, so you don't want to stick your pipe. A couple of operators here in the 60s and 70s stuck pipe. They were using water-based mud, and they were way overbalanced. Well, there's enough wells been drilled historically now that it's become a pretty easy science to make sure we don't have those drilling issues.
So that managed pressure drilling, you want to, that's, if you want to explain what that is a little bit more, that might help a little bit, Tony.
Well, yeah, you go, geopressure is the point at which you pick up pressures that are abnormally high. And they're also the kind of pressures you can blow a well out on if you're not prepared for it. So, number one. And number two, when you're drilling through it, it can be sticky and thick shales. Because we've got thick shale. We got some 2,000, 3,000 foot shales to drill through just to get into the upper Wilcox. And this is just a method employed by the drilling engineers in the mud system, and using back pressure while they're drilling to make sure that the mud weights are uniform from the bit depth shown here all the way up to the surface of the earth, where you've got your mud system, and you're kind of like, how shall I say this, Jim? You got a brake on your car while you're going downhill very fast. It's like a choke. Yeah.
Right. And also, as you're making connections, it keeps everything consistent. It's a way of adding, if you want to, a little layer of insurance, if you will, to your to the actual method of drilling, to the mechanics of drilling. Would that be correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Another neat thing on this play, there are prospects. It's under this Enbridge pipeline, and there's an energy transfer pipeline, 1.5 miles, 2 miles to the northwest. So we've got chance for immediate hookup.
The Enbridge dissects our east and west location.
Yeah. The economics on this, well, looking at Jim, you want to take it from here?
Sure, if you want to kind of scroll this up a little bit, 12.56, if this is our, cost, what we're asking for is, this includes, geological and geophysical acreage, et cetera. Your total, including acreage on the first well, is 12.56 million, 125,000 per 1%, and change. Now, well number two, your geophysical costs and your acreage costs would drop off. So this number would basically drop by half, essentially. So if you go to so keeping that in mind, here, let's say the first well at $3 gas, I think is what we did, is a 15-month payout. That's about it's about $10,000 a month per 1% at $3 gas. So that's your cash flow. If your second well is significantly less expensive and your returns are the same, your rate of return is better, obviously. Or if your cost is half as much and you're producing the same amount, your rate of return has doubled. Keep in mind.
You don't have to be a genius to figure that.
Keep in mind, we're using 15 million a day here on gas. Remember, Tony said that it would not be difficult to get a couple of wells online and get your production rates up to 100 million per day. Now, 100 million cubic feet of gas per day at $3 gas is a gross amount of $300,000 a day. Okay, per day. That's income, gross income. So future cash flow obviously would bring us down to a 9-month payout. These are all subjective, obviously, based on what gas prices are and oil prices are, how much oil you're going to get per million cubic feet. And the most important aspect I want everybody to understand, a good gas well in East Texas is 3 million a day. These wells here can do 30 million a day. So this is kind of a big boy territory with geopressures that are very impressive. Very impressive. And I also wanted to point out, when you say you might want to frack one of these zones, you're doing, Tony, if you might want to chime in here, the frack that you might do on this Wilcox would be very limited. It would be a very small frack, right? I mean,
yes, less than 150,000 pounds or 100,000 pounds, Jim.
Okay, so like 3% of what you might do out in West Texas, for example, just enough to create a sink to create easy flow to your wellbore is basically what you're doing. You're just kind of opening it up a little bit. So we're not drilling shale wells out in West Texas and doing huge fracks and so forth. So anyway, so that is kind of the economics here. The idea here is a couple of these wells online producing and cash flowing, we feel like would be enough to where the project could basically self-perpetuate. We can, as our dollars come back to us, we don't hold anything in suspense. Everything goes to you. That every 90, 120 days or so, 150 days, whatever it is, we've got enough back to drill another well. And as we do that, we can our income goes up, and as our cash flow goes up, we can expand faster. So
Jim, I'm having a hard time hearing because there's another conversation across.
Okay, that's okay. I think someone that's all right. It's no problem. But anyway, so the idea here is that we that as we cash flow, we expand, and as we expand, our cash flow accelerates. And the goal here is to get to where we have produced $1 billion worth of product out of the ground. And we think we've got potentially at least that available for us. Anyway, that's a little bit of reverb there, but hopefully everybody heard that. Tony, I think that's about, is there any more slides? Is that the?
Well, just some regional stuff and my economic take on everything. Right now, it's $3.45 an MCF today. But the other thing too is there's another structure just about as big as us that produces from Upper Wilcox turbidite sands, and it's in the offshore. We believe the sands that are fed this mega structure offshore. Here's a map on it, Wilcox sand. And it's already, EUR is 230 million barrels of oil and 5.7 billion cubic meters of gas. They go by meters over there, but it's a huge field. So this stuff, when you find it and it's timed right, can really be big. Now, what's your chance of success, Tony? Well, this is straight out of the literature before we ever employed Deborah Sacre, but when you have a structure like this, yeah, and you've got the type of hydrocarbon indicators that we're seeing, flat spots, bright spots, and AVO signatures, that puts you up to about, on average, a 67% average chance of finding a very, very large field. And with Deb's work, that bumps it up to over 80%. But that's why I think this is a exploratory well. It needs to be drilled right now. The other thing going on still, we've got actually our rig count's going down still, not up. And LNG exports are projected to go through the roof now that we've got an administration that is lifting all the restrictions on it. I just read yesterday that Gale, which is one of the largest natural gas importers in India, they're trying to get and underwrite as many LNG terminals in Texas Gulf Coast as they can get their hands on. And Bill, that might be a candidate for whatever interest is left here if they want to own a piece of a big gas field to put their gas into. But anyway, yeah, I think we're you want to own a feature like a field like this to get back into high gas prices that I think are going to occur again. The last time gas was at $10, it dropped to 280 from numerous years, and it bounced back up for what, 7 years with prices of 6 to 8, even higher. Peaks were higher. But if we can, we're obviously economic at $3, but if we get 4, 5, or 6, and you're already flowing 50 or 100 million a day, makes it a little bit better from an economic standpoint. But that's
I think one more thing on why I have decided that we need to go into the natural gas arena and kind of leave oil alone a little bit is the power needed for all these AI driven
correct
facilities is tremendous. And that alone, I think, is going to propel these gas prices up, or at least that's our bet.
That would be actually the estimate is an 18% increase in energy demand within the next 14 months in the United States. So that's a pretty big number. So we'll see.
Well, that's why you want to discover your gas fields now, because the good thing is if gas were to pop back up into that $8 range, which is still much cheaper than oil on a energy equivalent basis. But if that happens, the drilling cost will go up, I guarantee it.
So the time to drill is now. Now's
the time to discover your field, and then you can properly deploy using cash flow and using management of drilling the rest of the wells. Because when that happens, I promise you I've been in this too long. I promise you the drilling cost will go up.
And I noticed, when we see, $150 oil, every drilling contractor in the world directs their price up, and then when the price of oil goes down, their price stays up.
Yeah, we're our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
Instead of working together, when prices go down, we go beat up the contractors. When prices are up, they beat us up.
So
But I don't think we'll be able to change that.
that's exactly right. So the time to move forward is now, when your drilling costs are reasonable. And we have running room here, guys. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is a massive prospect in size. And as Bill Orr just said, we've beaten this to death with science, not just with Deborah and Tricon, but with Akron's geophysicists and numerous other people. I mean, this has been a group effort scientifically, with many minds on this. And this goes back well over a quarter century now in coming. So with that said, let's, if anybody has some questions, please, we're here to answer any questions.
I assume you've created a kind of like a perk chart of cash flow expected, a reasonable expectation of what cash flow might look like from starting the first well through the 7th well or the 9th or whatever this is. So if an investor's sitting there and they're trying to reinvest and continue along with the drilling, what does that look like?
That's a good question, and we could do that.
But the answer is we have not done that yet.
Yeah, we could, but
But let me explain the reason.
Okay, go
Our
ahead.
total focus has been on proving up the concept that this is indeed the type gas reserves we're thinking. Then when we get past that, then you look and say, okay, we need to drill 8 more wells to finish holding all of this acreage. Doesn't mean that there could be far more wells than that, but 8 more would end up holding all of the prospective 2 faults. When we're ready for that, that's when we'll do a cash flow analysis of saying, okay, here's our cash flow from well 1. Here's what well 2 and 3 will cost. Here's the timing of that plan. And then you can appropriately do that. Right now, to do that, I think is just an exercise in futility, personally.
The key is to drill the first well, get the cash flow started, see your decline curves, get an e-log, an electronic log on the bank, and that gives you enough data to know where your running room is. It confirms your science, and then to answer your question, Quentin, then you can start kind of dreaming a little bit more in detail for the future.
Then you're actually planning your cash flow based on your expenditures and know the rate that you need to develop. Because unlike anybody else, we're gonna have a big piece of this. I wanna see how many wells do we have to be into it before the cash flow takes care of itself.
And we have a continuous drilling clause of 1 well every 6 months. Is that right?
Once the primary acreage, once the primary term on the acreage is up, that's correct.
I got you. Okay. Once that primary term is up, then that every 6 months to hold that acreage kicks in. Okay. All right.
I understand you're to ask that question would put you on the spot from an investment standpoint, and you're trying to, what does the future look like and what that expectation might be. I think that's why I'm asking the question.
That's a good
Oh,
question.
I understand that. I understand the question totally. I do.
Yeah, there'll be some metrics to employ, Quentin, like, let's say the 10,000 foot upper Hennet Sand works like gangbusters. And then maybe the deep one did too, and a couple of the others are medium. So there's gonna be price differences in your offset wells, not even counting, picking a location that'll test that Queen City. So it's kind of hard to project that out without having the depth of the pays exactly calibrated, and the wells tested. But yeah, that could be done.
In my world of working with projects, estimates with insurance companies, I was always continuously put on the spot to have to come up with something that would be considered even chainsaw math, just to get a perspective of what it might look like. So, because right now you see all this data, the science, but when it comes right down to how does that translate out to have ownership as a 1% ownership, and if you want to carry that forward, at this point, you can't tell me you don't have some sort of idea based on the 3D modeling to say, if you were to use a conservative number, what that might look like, knowing that, things could be completely different. But I understand producing something, you don't want to be held to it. I can appreciate that too. But
if we're gonna produce $1 billion gross out of the ground, and you're gonna own 1% of that, I think after I think our calculations on that other page, that shows that you would get returned eventually around $7 million. But if it took us 7 more wells to drill, you'd be kicking in dollars enough along the way to pay for each of those 7 wells. So it's not an exact number, but it is possibly over a 10 to 1 or more, especially at $4 gas. And so I'm not sure if that exactly answers your question, but the numbers can be so large you start to put them on paper and put it on a presentation like this, people start shaking their heads and they ask, well, it looks too good to be true or whatever. Well, it's not. It takes work. It takes you've got a lot of wells to drill to get there. And we're focused on step 1, obviously, is the first step's already been taken. He's got the acreage. That took years to do. And the processing of the data took millions of dollars. That's taken place. Step 2 is to drill the first well and establish cash flow. Step 3 would be to do exactly what you said, Quentin, I think, is to have a plan of action of over what time do you want to move these along? Do you want to drill 1 well every 6 months? Do you have enough cash flow from your first well to where you can move faster than that comfortably? The amounts that we have in here as individuals, including Bill, we're not going to be drilling a well every month or probably every 2 months to start with. We need dollars coming back. I think I'm probably accurate in saying that. So it really comes down to let's see what our cash flow is off well number 1, and then use that to plan the future. Well number 2 looks like it has higher reserves, but it's a directional well, and because it's directional, we felt like mechanically it might be a little bit more complicated to drill. So we're drilling well number or the well number one first, because it's a straight vertical well, the west block.
Yeah, I just showed this slide, you know, let's kind of, you know, look at it from a real basic point of view. If the first well vertical hits and we get established 15 million a day, that'll prove up this whole closure. So you've got two immediate development wells to drill at whatever depth those pays are at immediately. So the second well, after you've got confirmation of good pay and cash flow here, and it holds up, you like to get a few months of production, I would go and drill the east location next. Drill that directional well, which will set up at least 4 more offsets on that fault block. So just right here on these first two closures, I can put, you know, 8 total wells. So and spacing of 2-3 months apart, 4 months apart. You know, we've got a couple of years of drilling here, maybe.
Yeah, easily.
Now, this is a question. Are we at the mercy of the gas company who participates in the cost of the transmission? Are we going to be bearing the burden of that, or is that something that
It's like looking at chicken. It's like looking at chicken farming. And you're interested in eggs, and he's interested
I
in
think Bruce's mic is on.
feeding
Sorry.
chickens to
Did
roast.
you catch that, Tony or Bill?
Well,
He's been after me for a couple weeks.
I'm hearing different conversations, but I think, you know, whenever you go into the gas pipeline,
But you're doing it for me.
the price that you get, they've already deducted from that the transport cost to get from point A to point B. And we're going into major lines, and so that's not going to be very significant. We won't have any gathering charges or any need for compression charges either. So we're not really at the mercy, but trust me, they've got some transport cost in that against the price that you're gonna be getting paid.
So
I'm not sure who asked that, but hopefully I answered that.
that was Quentin, yeah, originally, yeah.
Bruce, how do you see that? I think he went offline.
I don't know.
It was a question that Bruce asked today because he has leases on wells, and he says one of the difficulties he's run into is that he's at the mercy of whoever's charging for the transmission, and it comes back to land. You know, all of a sudden it's like, hey, that's not nice. You're getting dinged, and you're kind of at the mercy of whatever they want to charge. So
He's talking about transportation or your cost of transmission, your transmission charges.
the transmission cost of moving the gas from the wells out.
Yeah, well, as much as we're moving and the pressures that we're gonna have, we don't have to pay for compression, and the volumes that we'll have, they're gonna kind of more be at our mercy, because they're gonna, I think, want our business. I think that's probably.
Yeah, they need the volume, number one. Number two is where we have a little bit of advantage if somebody were to try to take advantage of that, is that we have 2 major pipelines in the immediate area. Obviously, I'd rather see the one that goes right through the middle of our acreage. But the fact that we have another one that's only about 7,500 feet away to the west, I believe, will keep that honest.
Okay.
Competition's always good on that.
We have more than one option, Quentin. So that
Have
helps
you
a
talked-
lot.
Have you talked to the gas line on the west?
Yeah, well, I have not, but Doyle Valdez with my entity who has marketed gas for us, and I've worked with him for, golly, 25 years. He's had multiple conversations with both.
Good question. All right, anybody else have a question? I know we went over quite a bit, but I wanted this to be thorough. And I made a recording of this for, some people had to drop off. I'm sure they had to go earlier. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is a massive, massive play. There are not very many of these left in the United States, at least in the lower 48 anymore. We're in South Texas. We're not doing oil fracking and shale. These are conventional wells drilled in one of the most premier gas fields in the United States, if not the world. And this has been almost 30 years in the making, and probably close to $5 million has already been spent in preparation for us to get to this point. So for those that have already said they're in, they're in. If you want to make a, tell me how much, or tell Jeff Potty or myself or both of us kind of what amount, what level you think you might be interested in or have other questions. Let us know as soon as you have any other questions
Sure.
going forward. Anything else? All right. Well,
Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you very much.
Thanks for having, very informative.